In 1891, Joseph Bradshaw, a Melbourne pastoralist searching for grazing land, pushed up the Roe River in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. He was not an archaeologist. He was looking for suitable ground for cattle. On a sandstone escarpment, he found painted figures that had never been recorded before. George Gray, a colonial explorer who later became South Australian governor, had documented rock art in the Kimberley in 1838. Gray's recordings showed the Wandjina style, large, pale spirit faces with dark eyes and no mouths. Bradshaw's discovery was different. The figures were slender and active, dressed in what appeared to be ceremonial gear. He sketched them, noting pale blues, yellows, and browns that he compared to ancient Egyptian art. He presented his findings to the Royal Geographical Society in Victoria. For decades, the art received little scientific attention. In 1936, American archaeologist Daniel Sutherland Davidson examined Bradshaw's sketches and dismissed them. He argued that Bradshaw's encounter with the site was too brief, that the drawings lacked any Aboriginal interpretation, and that they might be inaccurate. Davidson stated the sketches carried a Eurocentric bias. Without the original paintings available for comparison, no one could verify or refute his claim. During this period, the mural remained undisturbed in the gorge, while modern land management backburning began to damage the site. In 1938, anthropologist A.P. Elkin led a team from the Frobenius Institute into the Kimberley specifically to study this art. The team brought Aboriginal guides who recognized the figures immediately. Unlike the Wandjina paintings, which the guides treated with reverence, these images drew a different response. One guide recounted a creation story passed down across generations. He described Kujon, a black bird that struck its bill against the stones until it bled, then used that blood to paint human-shaped figures on the rock. The guide stated these figures depicted spirits, not animals. Researchers have since identified 4 distinct styles of this art across the Kimberley. The earliest and most detailed are the tassel figures, large, ornate figures identified by tassels hanging from the arms and waist, wearing conical headdresses and armbands and carrying boomerangs. Next are the sash figures, similar in structure but sturdier, marked by 3 pointed sashes across the body and bags attached to the belt. The elegant action figures differ significantly, typically shown running, kneeling, or hunting with multi-barbed spears. No elegant action figures have been found painted over or defaced by later artists, indicating they held a distinct place within the tradition. The most recent style is the clothes peg figures, simpler in form, painted in red pigment, and depicted in aggressive poses. One panel shows a battle scene with opponents arranged in facing ranks. Image processing has shown that artists painted outlines first, then filled them in. Some faces display anatomically accurate features, detailed enough to be considered portraits. Strands of hair are painted at a thickness of just 1 to 2 millimeters. This level of control has led researchers to propose that the artists may have used feather quills rather than brushes or fingers, a theory supported by an imprint of a feather found at one site. No evidence of corrections or revisions during painting has been identified, indicating the compositions were planned and executed in a single attempt. For years, Western observers described figures in these paintings as having paunches, suggesting pot-bellied bodies. Later analysis revealed that the figures are painted as if facing into the rock itself, meaning what appeared to be a belly was in fact the back of the figure. The structures previously identified as paunches were gluteal structures, not stomachs. The placement of this art follows a consistent pattern. While Wandjina art is largely restricted to specific sites and painted, mainly on ceilings, this art appears on vertical surfaces high on escarpments. The rock shelters at these sites are shallow, with small overhangs and irregular rocky floors unsuitable for habitation. This suggests the paintings were not created in places where people lived, but rather functioned as territorial markers, ritual signals, or messages left at locations of significance. The art spans the sandstone regions of western and central Kimberley, with isolated examples recorded as far east as the Napier Ranges. For years, most sources dated this tradition to at least 17,000 years old. That figure originated from a 1997 study using optically stimulated luminescence on quartz particles, within a mud wasp nest built over one of the paintings. This method measures when sand grains were last exposed to sunlight. The result indicated the nest, and therefore the painting beneath it, was at least 6,400 years old. This number became the standard figure cited in textbooks and documentaries. Rock, art pigment, typically contains no carbon, meaning standard radiocarbon dating cannot be applied directly to the paint. The surfaces are subject to significant weathering, and the specific techniques used by the original artist remain unknown. Archaeologists required an alternative dating method and found one in mud wasp nests. In 2020, a team led by Damien Finch at the University of Melbourne published a study in Science Advances, working with the permission and assistance of the Balangara and Dambimangari traditional owners. The team collected samples from more than 108 rock art sites across the Kimberley. Rather than dating the pigment directly, They dated mud wasp nests built both above and below the paintings. A nest built over a painting establishes a maximum age for the art beneath it. A nest built underneath establishes a minimum age. Comparing both types of nests allows researchers to bracket the period in which a painting was made. The team reported 101 radiocarbon dates. Most of the figures examined were painted between 700 and 11,500 years. Ergo, at least 5,000 years later than the previously accepted estimate. One motif, however, dated to approximately 17,000 years, standing as an outlier from the rest of the dataset. The research also established that wasps had been building nests in these shelters quasi-continuously for more than 20,000 years, indicating the dating method could be applied to other archaeological features in the region. This dating places the majority of the tradition at a specific point in history. Approximately 12,000 years ago, the last ice age was ending. Sea levels were rising, submerging the northern coastline and displacing communities from land that had been dry for millennia. The Kimberley landscape was undergoing substantial transformation during the period in which these figures were painted. While this dating research was underway, a separate and contradictory narrative had already taken hold. Beginning in the late 1970s, amateur archaeologist Graham Walsh began working in the Kimberley. Over 3 decades until his death in 2007, he recorded 1.5 million rock art images and located more than 2,500 new sites. Walsh proposed that this art predated the Pleistocene and suggested it might not have been created by Aboriginal people. The theory gained attention because the art differs stylistically from other rock art traditions recorded in Australia. The idea appeared in books, documentaries, and eventually entered political discussion. In 2015, a senator publicly suggested that people other than Aboriginal Australians may have occupied the continent in the past, citing anthropological disagreements as supporting evidence. A team of ARC-supported archaeologists from the University of Melbourne and the University of Western Australia has worked directly with traditional owners to date and document the Kimberley sequence. Professor Peter Veth, one of the project's chief investigators, stated that the figures are of Aboriginal origin and form, part of a long tradition of signalling places of importance within the wider landscapes. There is no archaeological evidence supporting a pre-Aboriginal population in Australia. The art remains an anomaly in the sense that it appears in the record after the last glacial maximum with techniques and visual conventions that differ from what preceded and followed it. And researchers have not fully explained how the style developed in this form. The names used for this tradition vary by region and language. The Ngarrindjin people refer to the figures as Gwion Gwion. In the Napier Ranges and around Broome Bay, they are known as Giro Giro or Kiro Kiro. Researcher David Welch traced these terms back to a single root word, Kujon, the name of the black bird from the creation story first recorded in 1938. These regional names represent variations of the same underlying tradition rather than separate traditions. The creation story describes Kujon striking its bill against the stones until it bled, then using that blood to paint human-shaped figures on the rock, depicting only spirits and no animals. Aboriginal guides in 1938 described these images to the Frobenius expedition as depictions of bush spirits, referred to as Demi. Similar accounts were recorded by Ian Crawford in 1969 and Patricia Vinicum in the 1980s. Aboriginal communities in the Kimberley continue to perform dances featuring apparel that matches the paintings, including headdresses, boomerangs, and string. The imagery also appears in contemporary art produced for sale in the region. Artist Kevin Weiner produces works referencing Gwion Gwion imagery that connect current Aboriginal identity to this tradition. Professor Veth's team has described the paintings as signals placed at locations that held significance within the broader landscape, made for audiences who understood the associated symbols and stories. The 12,000-year window during which most of the tradition was painted coincides with a period of substantial environmental change in the Kimberley, including rising sea levels and a shifting coastline. The scale and technical precision of the art indicate that the communities producing it maintain trade networks extending across hundreds of kilometers, along with complex ritual practices requiring specific costumes and equipment. Some of the paintings have persisted due to an unexpected interaction with microorganisms. Many figures are colonized by bacteria and fungi, including a black fungus that forms a symbiotic relationship with the red pigment used in the paintings, contributing to the preservation of the artwork rather than its degradation. Several questions remain unresolved following the 2020 dating study. Researchers have not determined why one motif dates to approximately 17,000 years while the majority cluster around 12,000 years. It also remains unclear what occurred to the tradition following the clothes peg period, and no explanation has been established for how the earlier styles developed the level of technical precision documented at these sites.